Hello and welcome to the Ukrainian Toronto Television podcast. I'm Mark Kaplan.
And I'm Melania Podolyak.
And we are here today to discuss sports, actually, and because there are some news, sports news.
Yes, there is some news. So following a request by the 11th Olympic Summit, the International Olympic Committee issues recommendations for international federations and international sports event organizers on the participation of, surprise, surprise, athletes with a Russian and Belarusian passport in international competitions. So these are some reviewed recommendations. And Mark, what do you think about it?
Yeah, well, year ago, the IOC issued recommendation not to let them participate. It was up to federations, different sports federations. They cannot press those to commit to their rules or something like that. Those are not rules. Those are recommendations. But a year ago, they asked not to let them participate. This time, they let them participate. They recommended to let them participate under neutral flag. And it stirred a little bit of controversy from Ukrainian Olympians and from Olympians from other countries, from Germany, etc. And we wanted to discuss that, but we found out that we know very little about sports. And because of that, me and Melania, we are not sportsmen, but we found one, the Ukrainian Olympian, Vladyslav Heraskevych, who was very kind to come to us and tell us everything about how this sports works and why this is a huge problem. By the way, it is very important to us, so as many people could listen to this podcast or watch this podcast, right? So we would kindly ask you to press like, leave a comment. What do you think about this decision by IOC? And probably subscribe to our channel, right?
Also, Vladyslav has said himself in the interview, spoiler, that, it's important. The way we can influence the situation is to spread the message. So please do not hesitate to share this video with your friends and family.
Absolutely. It is very informative and interesting.
So, Vladyslav, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you do and for your work. And our first question would be, how does it feel as not just a Ukrainian, but as a professional sportsman, to find yourself in this situation with, people refusing to ban Russia from the Olympic Games and whatnot? How does it feel as what you do?
So first of all, it's a big pleasure to be here, and it's pretty terrifying, especially every day we live and we see these terrible, just insanely terrible stories about our fellow Ukrainians, about our colleagues from sports, about people, at example, Dmitro Sharper, he was in one team in Youth Olympic Games, and he was killed in Bakhmut, and of course it's just terrifying to see that it feels unfair at all to have this war in our country, and it's big injustice. At the same time, IOC tried to bring back Russians and Belorussians, and of course, also legal base is very suspicious. I would say yesterday Thomas Bach stated that we take into account some summits, Olympic summits, also very suspicious. Still, IOC officials not banned from IOC. Colonel of Russian Army, he is head of Russian Olympic Committee. He's still being in all discussions with IOC. And his opinion is still taken to attention and taken into account. And of course, it's you can't understand why, how it's possible. And also, Pozdnyakov is clear propagandist. He stated that it's a big honor for Russian actors to take part in special military operation. And still, IOC continue to talk about big solidarity with Ukraine. So it's a kind of hypocrisy, double standard world. I would say it's not great for Olympic movement, and it's very bad for future generation at all.
And in case if it's going to be like that, if Russians and Belarusians will be allowed to participate in Olympic Games and other like games, you will have to compete with them, right? Like against some colonel of Russian army or something like that. Like the guy who's officially in the army, which is killing your friends and colleagues, will be competing against you on the Olympic Games, right?
So yesterday, because of pressure last days, maybe you follow it to special rapporteur of United Nations, Xantaki. She got a lot of criticism for her extremely like stupid, I would say, because I can't find another world statements about that athletes or like soldiers, Russian soldiers who willingly and gladly go to the war, they're not guilty. So no words needed. And I would say because of this pressure was also added requirements that people who have contracts with military is not allowed to join Olympic competitions in international federations. But it's also important to understand that it's just recommendations. So it's not responsibility of IOC. IOC put all responsibility on international federations, and but officials, IOC officials, is responsibility of IOC, and we see what is decision. So they keep them in all commissions and in all structures. Another thing that is not discussed about. If they have contracts, it's about contracts in time of competition or in some past time or like in some period of time, because it also wasn't written and it wasn't said by someone, so it's remains unknown. And for sure, like still these IOC statements, they leave just huge amount of questions, and I hope we will get answers soon. So personally, like I'm not appreciate position of boycott, how good side announce it, because overall it's bad for the sport. Because if we, we have example fencing. Now they allowed Russians to compete, like last week or 2 weeks ago. And if all our champions, Olga Harlan and other fencing athletes, they're just not competing, we just lost sports. Like we don't have fencing anymore in Ukraine. But at the same time, Russian athletes will compete, and they will make like picture of united with all world. They will get better communication with the world, and they will try to, of course, put narratives on the table. And it's not right. It's not our goal, because we just looks like give up, and it's not really effective in our situation.
So it's basically when we boycott Olympics and when we boycott, for instance, Ukrainians, Poles, Lithuanians, whatever, we're not punishing Russia for what they're doing. We're punishing our own athletes, right? And that's not the goal. The goal is to punish those who are guilty, you know? There was something I wanted to clarify for our audience, because it's something that is not often discussed and not known, is that I guess a lot of Olympians, especially Russian Olympians, it's a long-standing traditions, are also members of Russian military, right? They have actual, they received, for instance, in 2022, a lot of them have received these medals from Shoigu, from Russian Minister of Defense. They have positions in the Russian military. So just let's try to explain this to our audiences that, it's not just about supporting the war. Some of them are actual military personnel. Am I correct?
Yeah. So it was also the topic of discussion with this special reporter from United Nations. We asked her literally so if they're going on the front line and they're killing Ukrainians, they're guilty. She said no, if they not committed genocide or like some war crimes. But as I see, like illegal war is already war crime, and but she have some own point of view. So
yeah, I have read your discussion with her. She literally said, like, it's okay if they go to war as long as they don't commit war crimes, which is makes no sense.
Kind of high bar, right?
I asked her, like, we should film a documentary of each athlete about which where they commit crime or how you see it. So even I ask like if they willingly and gladly go to the war, so they don't was pressured with everything, they're not guilty. So I would say she is pretty insane, and I'm glad that already Kislitsa, he answered officially, and he writes that she also important to understand that it's kind of trying to fool us from IOC, because she grabs this random woman. She's not related to the sport. She's not sport expert. And in some of our discussions before, in Atlas Commission conference, we hear from her answers that she's not understand topic of sport at all. And Kislitsa and proved that she is not representative of United Nations. So special reporter of United Nations is independent mandate holder, and it's not opinion of United Nations. But many people was thinking that it's probably opinion of United Nations, and it's kind of also trick from IOC to fool us. But now we see that it's independent, just her personal opinion. And now we have question why we took her personal opinion into account if she not related to the sport, and if she have so crazy, insane ideas. Why we took her opinion? So it's kind of a tricks from IOC, and it's pretty dirty, I would say, for an organization who try to say something about peace movement and Olympic movement.
So Mr. Bach recently stated that the participation in Olympics is a human right, and we will deny human rights to Russians if we ban them. Is it really a human right to participate in sports, or is it slightly different? I mean, it's not something given and something which is necessary, or how do you think about that? As a sportsman yourself,
it's simple. So, as country have constitution, we have Olympic charter. In Olympic charter, in I believe 44.2 or 44.3 article, and it's nobody allegate to have a right to participate in Olympic Games. So literally you don't have right to participate in Olympic Games. You should follow some requirements, and you should earn this right. It's not given for you. So it's simple. It's just Olympic charter. So I'm not even telling my opinion. It's Olympic charter is our constitution of Olympic movement. But looks like Bach not read it before.
Yeah, why would he do that?
Why would he?
You
see, so speaking about earning the rights, so there has been this amazing opinion that let's allow Russians who don't support the war compete. There's this, Bach said that we have very strict provisions, very strict recommendations, yada yada yada. But is it possible to be an Olympian from Russia and not be connected to the Russian government? Is it even a thing?
Yeah, it's possible, I would say. And maybe it's possible in the case of some Belarus athletes. It's a good example. So they have association of athletes who was punished by government. Now they living in other countries. They refuse to have a passport, Belarusian passport, and some athletes able to compete for a refugee team. So in this case, I think it's possible, but you should recall, or how it's better to use which word, passport, and then it's pretty clear. So then you also you should follow, of course, another requirements, military experience. So attended to they was attended to military or not. They was some taking part in some active propaganda, as in be stationed with Putin, at example, in Luzhniki Stadium, or they was taking some medals from Shoigu, or they was attending to some propaganda events, as it was, at example, in Ukrainian kids camp Artek. They create some young army things, and also was some athletes was attended to this event. So they also shouldn't, even if they lost, even they refuse their passport, because it's totally opposite to Olympic movement values. And I think it's possible, but requirements should be first of all more requirements, and they should be more strict. And then it's possible. But it's clearly to understand that our goal is to prevent using of Russian propaganda on international sport arena. And for now, if they keep Russian and Belarusian passport, only one opportunity to prevent it is just to suspend them. And what now we should we need to do. But if they ready to refuse passport, if they're ready to sign anti-war declaration, and if they're ready to public speak about that they're not common like with Russian government and they against these decisions of Russian politics and Kremlin regime, then why not? So our goal is not to make Russian athletes suffer. We are not animals. We are not as the occupiers. So we have another point of view. And if you really against this war, please, but you should prove it. It's not like Thomas Bach told yesterday, because it's really weak requirements.
Like technically, you don't just sign up on some website and like, I want to go to Olympics, yada, yada, yada. You have to be a part of some organization, right? And like most of Russian athletes and most of Ukrainian athletes as well are part of governmental organizations, like, or sub-governmental, which are dependent on government. And you told about this Belarusian independent organization. Is there like some Russian independent organization which sends Russian athletes to this Olympics?
No, so it's a little bit different. So structure works. We have Olympic Committee, International Olympic Committee, and we have members of this committee. So it's national Olympic committees. It's also non-government organization, all of them. It's a writing institute, and also it exists refugee team. So in the refugee team, a few like last years, like last decade, I would say, it's Syria athletes who have war, who run from the war, and they like competing for refugee team, and someone who in the same situation. So government organization can't send like athletes to Olympic Games. It's just national Olympic committees or refugee team or like some participant of Olympic movement or Olympic family, I would say, and they part of Olympic International Olympic Committee. So independent organization who sends them is refugee team. So they join refugee teams through some also like they check. They also should follow some requirements. And first of all, of course, in our sports we should earn license, Olympic license, and we should also in some sports you should show exactly some result. Or in my sport example, skeleton, so we have racing and we don't have like some results, so you should earn points, and like it's a ranking system, and like you should be like somewhere in the ranking. It depends on each sport. So it's how you can get to Olympic Games.
Right. But like this Olympic committee, the National Olympic Committee, they are usually dependent on the government, right? Like I guess our is kind of dependent. Or not? I'm not sure about that. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, so it's very different in each country. So, at example, in USA, it a little bit better works marketing things and sponsoring stuff. So they are more independent. In some countries, they more but it's very different. And but anyway, they shouldn't get pressure from government for some decisions. So, like it's kind of also part of statute of each National Olympic Committee. But if you talk about specifically Russia, as I mentioned before, Pozdnyakov, colonel of Russian army, clear propagandist, and clear he clearly like stated some Russian narratives and propaganda, and he is head of this committee. So like it's of course in Russia, when they talk about sport out of politics, especially these persons, it's a kind of a joke because they fully like support this war, and they already stated before. So in Russia, it's not independent structure, but in Russia, sport is general. Like if we go in like a little bit back in time, and we remember like Sochi Olympic Games, exactly a year when war starts in Ukraine. So it wasn't random. It was just a tool to increase image of Russia, and of course, after that, 2 years later, we remember biggest doping scandal in the world, I think, in Olympic history. So FSB. Some special structure, like government structure from Russia, they changing sample for athletes.
Yes.
So if sport for them is out of politics, why they do it?
Yeah, this was actually something I was going to ask you also, because a lot of people say stuff like, sports are, let's even imagine the situation like, okay, you don't care about Ukrainians, you don't care about the war, fine. But we have the cases you have mentioned with, Mr. Rodchenkov being a whistleblower, Rusada and whatnot. So are these issues of Russian doping resolved to an extent that we can now discuss whether Russians can participate because of war. So again, you're a sportsman, you know better. Are there any signs that Russian athletes, even those who don't support the war, or like when we don't care about politics, like did the Russian sportsmen even change? Did anything really change since the doping scandals, really, in terms of Russia?
It's a good question. So in my personal view, I remember like last Olympic Games, and maybe some of you follow a figure skating event, and was team event, and till now we don't know who is a winner, because they have this also very big doping scandal with Valieva. So Russia literally like hit with the doping, and now WADA, anti-doping agency, they don't know what to do. So they don't know what to do, and like they in pretty struggling because it's a kid, and they can't work with kids because she's not 18 and not even 16, so like 15, so small, and she already has this doping. And of course, a lot of Russian athletes since this scandal, they were catched by using doping. Also now, we have also conversation about like how they being tested now in Russia. They say that it's some international testing agency, independent, but I not really believe that something independent can work in a terrorist state in some legal beginning. So as I see, like it's kind of weird situation also with doping.
So we have the situation where we have a lot of sportsmen from Russia who either are members of the military or support propaganda and war, or are not clear about fair play and are suspected in doping, and there is no way of saying whether they stopped doing it, and you cannot prove anything. So all of this, taking all of this into account, all of these problems and issues that everybody knows about in the sports industry, why is this even a discussion now? Is this because of corruption or stupidity, or what do you think is the reason? Why, taking all of these problems into account, we are still having this discussion whether should Russians, be allowed to compete?
I would say, problem is that IOC don't take in all this information into account. So like it's the biggest problem. And also I think today in the conference we will talk more about it more deeply, because we also have lawyers who will tell them their personal legal opinion. But overall, so Russia, as we understand, is a pretty rich country. Even like not people in Russia, of course, just country, and like just high-ranked people in Russia. But anyway, it's really bad to see that they are so rich in international sport arena. And as we know about decision in fencing, just Usmanov, it's one of the richest person in Russia, and it's just a toy for him, this federation. And as we see now, decisions was making is pretty disgusting. Even countries who are loyal to us, but their organization, they just voting for some nonsense because of pressure. And we see now they try to remove any stickers with even Ukrainian colors. So they just totally against solidarity with Ukraine, any solidarity. So I think, just Russia have too much influence. And still, if we talk about IOC, for me, it's the same question as at the beginning. Why still Pozdnyakov and other Russian officials who another people exist in IOC commissions, as Isenbaeva example. Isenbaeva and 3 other people, Trepyshev and Popov and one more, I don't remember his name, they get personal sanctions from our government. And now we're facing situations that IOC talk about solidarity with Ukraine, but they not respect our law. And they have these people in commissions, but these commissions is full responsibility of IOC. They decide who will be in commissions. And it's not even discussion how you can talk about solidarity if you have major of Russian army in commission, if you have discussions with colonel Russian army. So I would say Russia have just too much influence, but and also politics of IOC now, it's pretty weird because everyone going around Thomas Bach, and all meetings with athletes from Africa, from Asia, it was closed meetings, like private meetings. Some other summits, very suspicious, without media, and they come on a stage and say, we decide something, but we don't even hear discussion. And as we see in another international federations, at example, like World Athletics Federation, they decide pretty strict that Russia and Belarus should be suspended. Strict rule. Sebastian Coe, head of federation, it's the biggest Olympic federation in Olympic movement, and they decide to suspend them. So why you don't listen like biggest federation? And in this voting, when they suspend Russian and Belarusian athletes, it was also a voting from African countries, from Asian countries, and they vote to suspend them. So it's already some crack in this theory of IOC that Africa and Asia support Russia. It's not right, because some organizations is not supporting Russia, but we can't check it because it's private messages, it's private calls. So today we will do press conference on public with different athletes from different countries, and you can hear opinion of real athletes and you can ask them questions. So I wish that Olympic movement should be more open to people, not as a private as we see. And it's of course it also should be more honest.
It sounds like we will be having another Netflix documentary closer to the Olympics, like FIFA sequel or something like that. Because like, have you watched the FIFA documentary? Like, it's just everything you say. It just sounds so familiar. It's just
yes, we've heard this before. Every time in sportsmen, it's either FIFA or WADA or RUSADA or anything. It's always the sport. My biggest concern is that for some reason, and I'm biased, I'm Ukrainian, right? Whatever, but it's always, the fair and the good people who are suffering at the end of the day, because everything is bad. So with doping, not fair. People can't compete when they use chemicals to enhance their performance, right? And then because Ukraine has war and Ukrainians are dying and Ukrainian sportsmen are dying, as far as we're concerned, like 72 sportsmen have died in this war since the beginning, right? So we can't train, we can't compete. And the only way, people, like, as you said, boycott, it's also a method, but it's good. It's a bad method because we're punishing our own people and not letting them compete. So for some reason, in this weird structure of this organized sport, which has all these values and talks about these human rights, for some reason, it still looks so perverse and so wrong. It's like the evil wins again, which, people like sports because sports are fair, right? In their minds, people see competition.
So we're also like against it, because like now image of sport at all, like it's going down and down. So like we have Qatar, it was extremely big scandals about human rights in Qatar. Why we make Qatar Olympic and Qatar world champion, like, and why FIFA do it, and so was even documentary about it. Also before was China Olympic Games. Also was a lot of discussions about human rights. Russia Olympic Games, as we see where it goes to literally war. So looks like now Olympic movement is not about peace movement and not to bring united and friendship. They try to pretend it, but in the end of the day, it's just about gritty business and just to increase image of country who have a huge problems inside.
Right. And that's why countries like Qatar and Russia and China are using this, because people like sports, and it's the soft power and soft influence.
Yes, soft
that
power
they're using. Yes.
For me as an athlete, it's extremely hard to see this using of sport, we have a lot of we have charity foundation in Ukraine. We work, and like at summer we start to do charity trainings for kids. And sport is a beautiful thing, sports at all, and it's amazing tool to make rehabilitation for kids who was on a war, who was in these destroying cities. We make trainings in Chernihiv, in Kiev region. I believe he was there, and you see these nightmares, these destroying stadiums, these destroying houses. These kids was sitting for months in a bomb shelter. And for them, sport is an amazing tool to make rehabilitation. So they can set new goals. They have now we have in the team few kids, and they trying to win Olympic license for Youth Olympic Games. And for them, it's an amazing goal, because like sport at all, it's about emotions, about good emotions. It's about friendship with people from another country, with your colleagues. So I'm not really like to say that we're competing against someone. We're competing with someone. So we're united. We like try to create better world in the end of the day. It's our goal as an athletes. But suddenly now all these dreams is they just coming down with all of these decisions. We see how bad politics of IOC, and even if they talk about sport is out of politics, but in past they have some good examples, some bad examples. But now I would say it's one of the worst time of Olympic history with all of these decisions last years. And I really want to have some fair competitions. Also important to mention that a lot of statements of Bach, he said like athletes can't act against war in Russia because they will be pressured by government, and their families will be pressured.
That's exactly the point. I mean, like, yeah. That's why don't let them compete.
But okay. Let's talk another way. So like, even they been punished. So like, he talked about human rights problem, amazingly big human rights problem. So they don't have freedom of speech. They been some group of people who have another opinion on another, like I would say, religion. Yeah, so it's almost the same. They've been punished. So it's pretty similar to apartheid time in Africa, and it was pretty simple solution for IOC back then. They just suspend Africa for 32 years from Olympic movement, and it's interesting to know like how much development lost South Africa, how much time in the sport they lost. So why now you're acting differently? Yeah, so just because of Russia. So Russia last like I would say 9 years, they have very special treatment. So if they using doping, Thomas Bach going on the stage and say they're not guilty because it was like government program. They're really not guilty. And some athletes who was on a list of Rachenkov, so it's evidence that they're using doping, they continue to do sports. And they always not guilty, even if they have doping in their blood. They also now, some woman, insane woman, I'm glad that media pressure was there, but first of all, she stated that they're not guilty if they're killing Ukrainians on the front lines. So what they should do to be guilty?
Yeah.
Why they're not equal to other athletes? And for me, like it's also kind of racism. Yeah. So like if athletes from South Africa, they should get very strict punishment. But if they're from Russia, we should be united and we should bring them back. And it's really interesting to see now how I see very like put very important part on human rights. And when was Beijing Olympic Games, and when was question about human rights problems, they say, we don't read about it, we don't know about it. It's kind of hypocrisy double standard reality. It's IOC reality now.
But as you stated before, they could, like, if they're pressured, if they're deprived of human rights, they could leave Russia, join refugee team. Russia is like has open borders. You can just cross them if you're Russian, no problem. You can go anywhere you want, almost, and you can join refugee team and like compete in the refugee team, no problem at all. You don't have to be pressured. You are not a hostage there, and you even can compete. Am I understanding this right?
I'm not sure about the refugee teams that they now are available to join it from Russia. So it's also not really clear from IOC side. Like it's very complicated system, and but for sure they can leave country, as we see like hundreds of thousands Russians they live in country, almost like millions. Yeah, I think even they leave countries, they go to Georgia, they go to some other countries. And we don't really see some strong opposition from these people to Russian government. Also, of course, it's important to mention that all sport in Russia, it's government money. So if they competing under national flag, but they get financial support from companies who under sanctions or from government who under sanctions. So also not right, in my opinion. Because it's blood money, and then we can understand that government have some interest of them competing. So it's total. If you watch like from each side, you can watch from different point of views, but it's totally nonsense to bring them back now, especially because a year ago was decision to suspend them. So now they want to bring them back. And
by the way,
now what is changed?
Have you heard the answer of Mr. Bach? So the Ukrainian if I'm not mistaken, Ukrainian journalist asked him, and he told he was protecting. They were protecting Russian and Belarusian athletes from hate, and because they were endangered after the war started.
Yes, but because nobody could provide them safety because Russians are so endangered 24/7. Yes, this was an amazing statement.
But I would say like its answer very weak because it's not really some basics behind this statement. Protection measures, but where is protection measures to Ukrainians if this Russian art has been used in propaganda? Bach can't answer on it also, and of course for me it now makes no sense to bring them back because just nothing is changed. So the same war, even worse. So like, but I think in intensity of war, like it's around the same. Why is this decision? But he also say because we have some meetings in this Olympic summit where like we have colonial Russian army, and he tell us that we need to bring Russians back, and we have some special reporter, she's insane. She say like nobody guilty, just Putin, and so I would say it's not really good basic for discussion, and is this basic very weak, very suspicious. And as I say, I wish that IOC could be like really more open, more honest with us, but they're really like now private organization, and they just doing business, and they just following. Person who pay money for them looks like that, who is the sponsors of federation or like International Olympic Committee. But now it looks like really bad, especially in terms of Olympic values and peaceful movement.
Okay, probably the last question: what journalists, sportsmen from around the world, what they should do to what do you think people should do to influence this decision? As I understood correctly, the final decision on the Olympics specifically were not made, and it's like up to them, closer to the Olympics. They can ban Russian athletes. What people should do, how they should influence this decision?
I just say, just tell the truth, what's going on, and help your native, like in your native countries, and provide some help on congresses of each international federation, because in the end of the day, they taking this decision. Each international federation. So talk with executive board, because executive board is also a very private organization of IOC. It's like famous people, but they're not talking to public. So we need to tell to know some opinions. So if they want to discuss something, we need to discuss it. They shouldn't discuss it just with themselves. It's the same discussion as if I sit in front of the mirror. Like it makes no sense because nobody knows what's going on. They just say we make this decision, then provide this extremely weak basic. And of course, so just tell the truth as journalists should do. And so it's my desire. And if you can support people who kind of like try to change it for the better.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Oh, this was very good. Thank you. Great.
Yeah, we actually wanted to make this like 10-15 minutes, but we actually talked for 50 minutes.
But it's very good. It's very great.
Thank you very much.
It makes so much sense that we're a nobody, and actually having you as a person, who knows about these things is very important. So yeah, this was a pleasant conversation. If you want to see more of those, please subscribe to this channel. Show your appreciation by putting likes or dislikes, comment, share, and see you next week.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.